Hello, everyone, and welcome to Clarksville's Political Forum. I'm Van Stokes, your moderator for today's session. And on behalf of Leadership Clarksville and your Clarksville Area Chamber of Commerce, we're glad you could be with us today. This forum is coming to you from the facilities at Austin Peay State University in the Mass Communications Department. And it's intended for you, the viewers at home, and the voters to have an informed choice when you go to the polls to vote. Today we have the opportunity to meet and greet and hear from the candidates for Circuit Court Judge Division 3. To my left they are Mr. Danny Brollier and Mr. John Gassaway.
Morning.
Now in a moment they will each have 2 minutes in which to provide opening comments. And after their opening remarks, we will then turn to our panelists for questions. Joining us once again, our distinguished panelists include the business editor and county government writer for the Leaf Chronicle, Mr. Jimmy Settle. From 5 Star Radio and ClarksvilleNow.com, Mr. Lee Erwin. And the executive director of Progressive Directions and the president-elect of Civitan International, Mr. Jay Albertia. Each candidate will be given 1 minute to respond to each question. Responses will come in a rotating order. At the conclusion of the questioning, each candidate will then have 2 minutes in which to present closing remarks. The closing remarks will also come in the reverse order from the opening comments. Our timekeeper for today's session is Ms. Yvonne Pickering. Let's go to our candidates now for our opening comments. We'll hear first from Mr. Danny Brollier.
Hello, my name is Danny Brollier, and I'm running for Circuit Court Judge in Division 3 in the Clarksville, Montgomery County and Robertson District. I would like to tell you just a little bit about myself and my family before telling you about my legal experience and why I'm running for this job. First, let me tell you that I'm 55 years old. I've been married to my wife, Sharon, for 35 years. I have 2 adult children, Joshua and Susan, one who lives in Chicago and one who still lives here in Clarksville, Tennessee. Let me tell you just a little bit about my legal experience. I have been practicing law in Clarksville since 1987. I started the practice of law in the law firm of Daniel Harville, Batson and Nolan. In that firm, I handled all kinds of cases, primarily dealing with business clients, business-related cases, and bankruptcy-related cases. In 1990, I went into private practice and as a solo practitioner, and in that capacity, I represented a lot of individuals in all types of cases. And then in 1993, I became a partner in a law firm with Jack Mitchell, Ross Hicks, Larry McMillan, and Kim McMillan. In 1996, I went to work for the district attorney's office, and I have been there ever since as a prosecutor. I have experience in prosecuting all kinds of cases through the criminal court system, including death penalty cases and trials at all levels, including death penalty cases and even misdemeanor DUI cases. I'm running because I believe that someone with my experience and with my legal and life experience is what we need for a good common sense application of the law in our court system. I promise that I will, in fact, seek to apply the law fairly and consistently in our court system if elected. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we'll have opening comments from Mr. John Gasaway.
Thank you, Van. And I would first like to start off by thanking Leadership Clarksville, the Area Chamber of Commerce, and of course the Communications Department here at Austin Peay. At 19, I came to Clarksville from Georgia. I came here to go to school here at Austin Peay. I completed my education here and graduated in 1969 with a BS degree in history and political science. I went on to law school and graduated in 1975, but I went to law school at night while I was teaching school. I got a job out of college, started teaching school here at the Clarksville Montgomery County School System, and I taught here for 6.5 years, and during that time, part of that time, I went to law school. I graduated in 1975 with a friend of mine by the name of Patrick McCutcheon. Patrick McCutcheon and I were friends in law school, and we started a law practice here in Clarksville. We hung up our shingles on 3rd Street. Later, he became the district attorney in 1982. And in 1990, I had the privilege and honor of being elected as the judge of Part 3 of the Circuit Court. I've served in that capacity now since that time, and I am seeking re-election. I'm married to Carrie Gassaway. We have 2 wonderful children. Abigail Grace is 9, and Emma Kate is 8. If given the opportunity to continue to serve as your judge of Part 3 of the Circuit Court, I promise to give you what I have given you for the last 24 years. That is a work ethic that is unchallenged by anyone. That is a honesty that I don't think anyone will call into question. That is patience so that I can hear and listen to a conclusion of all the litigants that come before me. And hopefully wisdom so that I can make a finding of fact and conclusion of law consistent every time I'm given that opportunity. Thank you.
And thank you, gentlemen, for the opening comments. Let's go now to our panelists for questions. Mr. Jimmy Settle, you're going to have the first question, and Mr. Brollier, you're going to have the first response.
Thank you. Mr. Brollier, you both have given some introductory remarks. If you will, please pinpoint and describe those aspects of yourself that you feel, compared to your opponent, uniquely qualify you for a seat on the Circuit Court Judge's bench.
That I have learned over the years, particularly as a prosecutor, to make decisions about cases based on the law and what is appropriate and right for the citizens of our district. I certainly will seek to do that as a judge. I believe that I have an objectivity that allows me to make those decisions with a common sense application of the law, which I believe is missing in the current judicial reign of Judge Gassaway.
Mr. Gasaway.
I think probably the paramount difference between Mr. Brollier and myself with respect to our qualifications is the experience that I've had. While Mr. Brollier's never been a judge except for a short period of time back in 2000, I've been a judge since 1990, and that's been on a continuous basis. I have served with Jim Walton, Bob Wiedemeyer, Ross Hicks, Carol Catalano, Larry McMillan, Alex Darnell, and serving with those people has given me the opportunity to learn as I went along. The experience that I have is tremendous. I have presided over probably 5, maybe over 600 jury trials. I've tried death penalty cases, I've tried robberies, I've tried rapes, I've tried all sorts of offenses, some of which are probably a little sensitive to even talk about here. I have tried everything there is to try, but not only that, I have tried the civil, and I'll get into that as we go along.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lear, when you have the next question, it goes to Mr. Gasaway.
Mr. Gasaway, so perhaps we'll have a bit of a better understanding. How do you define the role of this judgeship in the judicial process?
The role of a judge is to be an arbiter of the law. That means that he or she must listen carefully to all of the evidence that's presented, make a finding of fact based on the evidence that is presented, decide what the applicable law is, and apply that law to those facts, and then render a verdict or a judgment or a ruling based on the application. I think that's the role of every judge, or should be. The judgeship is a place where a person has been entrusted by the citizens of this district to make fair and equitable decisions. And the process by which you go through that is a process where you make findings of facts and conclusions of law based on what is presented before you. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brollier.
I believe that the role of a judge requires an individual, first, just in the community in general, to be an example in the community. If we do not have respect for our court system, we will not be able to maintain law and order within our court system. I think that example is certainly part of the role of a judge. Within the courtroom, a judge's role is in part to manage his caseload and to make sure that the litigants who come into the courtroom are able to try their cases under the rules of law that have been established by our legislature and by our courts. Certainly the judge's role is to listen and to let the evidence come in and allow the litigants to present their evidence consistent with the rules of law and rules of evidence that we have. The judge's role is to maintain a level playing field in the courtroom.
Thank you very much. Mr. J. Albertia, you have the next question. It goes to Mr. Brollier.
Gentlemen, as we've now talked about the role of the judgeship, what do you see as the number one priority of this office, and how do you go about addressing it?
It's difficult to say that a judge would have priorities in that sense. I believe that perhaps the number one priority is to maintain the movement of cases throughout our judicial system. We have a lot of cases that come before our courts. The caseload is very heavy. We're one of the heaviest in the state. It is definitely part of the judge's role is to make sure that the cases are heard in a timely fashion and as quickly as possible. Sometimes that means you have to encourage the lawyers that are involved, the litigants are involved, to bring cases, prepare cases for trial, to bring them to trial. That is all part of what we have to do, and certainly I see that as part of my responsibility.
Mr. Gasaway?
The 19th Judicial District, which is composed of Montgomery and Robertson County, is an extremely fast-growing district. The Administrative Office of the Courts, which is an arm of the Supreme Court of Tennessee, keeps up with a lot of statistics, and included in that is a database that has all of the filings and the dispositions that take place across the state. Montgomery County has one of the highest filings. That means the number of matters that are filed in the court, and also how many dispositions, that is, how those cases are disposed of. I'm proud to say that my filing and disposition rate is one of the highest in the state. I manage my cases well, I manage them efficiently, and I think the role of a judge is to take care of the business before him or her, and I think I have done that well.
Mr. Jimmy Settle, we come back to you. Your question goes to Mr. Gassaway.
Gasaway, from your observation, what are some of the greatest concerns that the 19th Judicial District faces in terms of criminal activity?
Over the years, I would have to say that there has been a tremendous rise in prescription drug abuse. You know, drug cases used to be almost limited to marijuana use, and then it was marijuana and cocaine. Now it's marijuana, cocaine, and some of the other scheduled drugs. And prescription drug abuse, in my opinion, is probably the worst problem that we've had of late. We've also had some gang activity, and when you put prescription drug abuse with gang activity, it's a recipe for an increase in crime. So to answer your question directly, I suppose it would be those two areas.
Mr. Brollier?
I believe that while we do have a significant amount of problems with prescription drug abuse and with drug-related crimes in general, I really believe that the most significant problem in our community in the criminal element deals with the violent crimes, the use of weapons, knives and handguns in crimes. And I believe that there is a general perception within our community, within the criminal element, that you won't be punished significantly for those types of crimes in this community. So that is one of our most significant problems. It is a problem that the court system certainly needs to address, and how we address that, it comes from the legislature. The legislature sets the punishment and kind of runs that ship, but the court system certainly needs to address that, and we need to be careful and be diligent to deal with the violent crimes in our community and make sure that those individuals who commit violent crimes are not out committing more crimes against our citizens.
Mr. Lee Erwin, your question goes to Mr. Danny Brollier.
Mr. Brollier, there are times when it seems the judicial process is a bit cumbersome. What, if anything, do you think should be changed in that process to make it a little less difficult to manage?
cumbersome is probably a very light word, honestly, for the way our system works. We have a lot of cases. There's an awful lot of litigation that goes through our court system. It definitely needs to be managed in a better way. One of the things that I would like to do is to try and meet with the attorneys from our local bar, from the bar in Robertson County and Montgomery County, and talk with them and try to get suggestions for how we can better manage the caseload that we have. In particular, we need to have cases go to trial. Trials need to happen on a regular and consistent basis, because that is how we dispose of the cases that will not settle within the system. And I believe the only way to make that happen is for the attorneys and the judges to get together and come up with a better system so that we are trying a significant number of cases on a regular basis.
Mr. Gass.
If you mean cumbersome to the general public, I think there have been certain steps that have been taken to try to alleviate some of that. Our current clerk of the circuit court, Cheryl Castle, has implemented not only a website which gives out information to the general public, but she has a number of forms that you can get from her office that will help facilitate pro se or people who are representing themselves. If you are talking about cumbersome in the operation of the court system, the dockets are full. We have a lot of cases because we're growing. We had 4 judges back in 1990. 24 years later, we still have 4 judges, and the population of this district has increased probably close to 100,000 people. So to avoid the cumbersome within the court system, it just takes a cooperation between the participants. That includes the lawyers and the judges. And I think that we have done that, and I don't see any reason why we can't continue to do that.
Mr. J. Alberti, you have the next question, and it's going to go to Mr. Gassaway.
Mr. Gasaway, we continue talking about the high level of number of cases that keep going through the court system. As the population continues to rise in our community, how do we continue to deal with the amount of court cases with the limited time that we have for you to sit on the bench?
There have been studies done. We've had actually 3 caseload studies, as we call it. And Montgomery County is on top as being the highest per capita per judge in terms of number of cases per judge. Our judges here have more cases than any other single judge in any other part of the state of Tennessee. It is very difficult to come up with a solution that will address all of the problems that flow from that. But until we get some help, it's going to continue to be very pressing and stressful. 2.5 judges was the last number that was shown in the study that we need in this district. I don't see that we're going to get a judge anytime soon, so the 4 judges that do the business of this district have to give everything that they can and work as hard as they can, which is what I have done.
Mr. Brollier.
The numbers of cases certainly is just significant. There's no way to get around that. We need more courts in our district. There's no way to get around that. But for now, the only solution is for us to just work harder. We need to be in court more often. We need to have the courts available to the litigants as often as possible, and we simply need to work more efficiently and effectively to try cases and to move the cases through the system to the best of our ability. There's no way to get around that problem. It is a problem that we have. The only way that I know really to address it is to just do what I've done as a prosecutor, roll up my sleeves and work hard, handle as many cases as we can possibly handle.
Thank you very much. If you have just joined us, you are watching Clarksville's Political Forum as we meet with candidates for Circuit Court Judge in Division 3. I also want to take this opportunity to remind you that Mr. Ben Dean is also on the ballot. Mr. Dean unable to be with us today. Let's go back to our panelists for more questions. Jimmy Settle, you have the next question. It goes to Danny Brollier.
Thank you. Mr. Brollier, we commonly hear this complaint from the general public. So it might be interesting to hear from your perspective as someone who aspires for the judgeship. Does sentencing match the crime today? Are there fallacies in our court system of prosecution and punishment that frustrate you?
Well, the answer is that yes, there are problems within our legislative system that frustrate me. One of the things that frustrates me the most is we have very significant punishment for drug-related crimes. You commit a crime, certain drug-related crimes, you will go to prison. At the same time, we do not have the same kind of consistent punishment for a lot of violent crimes. And I will tell people it is, you can sell half a gram of cocaine and wind up with a C felony conviction and a possible 3 to 6 year sentence for that. You can shoot somebody with a gun, be guilty of aggravated assault, and wind up with the exact same sentence. There's something wrong with our sentencing guidelines, and that change has to come from the legislature and not from the courts. The judges seek to apply the law and to give the sentences that the legislature has set forth for the crimes, but we need a legislative system that punishes violent crime first and foremost.
I think it's important for the public to first understand who actually gets sentenced. Of the hundreds, if not thousands, of criminal cases that come before the courts, most of them, the vast majority of them, are disposed of through plea agreements. Plea agreements are agreements that have been reached by the district attorney's office and the defense lawyer with the approval of the court. Those that are sentenced by the court are those who are not disposed of by plea agreements but who go to trial. After they are tried, if they are convicted, then sentencing has two aspects to it, the mandatory part and the discretionary part. The mandatory part is what the judge cannot do except for what the legislature says. That is the term within which, the range of punishment, the classification of the offender. The discretionary part comes with whether there is to be incarceration, whether there is to be a release status in the community, or some of both.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lee Erwin, it's your question. Mr. Gassaway, your response.
Mr. Gasaway, we're talking a lot about the public, so tell me why and in what areas, if any, can the public be more informed and, of course, more involved in the judicial system?
I think that involvement in the judicial system as far as the public is concerned should come at a very early age. I have fussed for years that civics is no longer taught in the public school system, or at least it's not taught the way I learned it. I'm not sure that every citizen can even name the 3 branches of government, and it's not their fault. To me, it is imperative that people learn as much as they can through every medium that there is. That means not only do you get online or learn that way, but come to court. It's a public trial. You can walk right in the door and sit right down and watch it from start to finish. You're welcome in my court. You can come anytime you want to, and you will learn a great deal. You will leave there much more informed than when you arrived.
Mr. Brollier.
I too believe that the public needs to come to court. You need to watch trials to understand what's going on within the court system. We really do not have a good idea. The general public does not have a good idea about what happens within the court systems. They need to be there. The other suggestion that I have is that the public needs to be willing to serve as jurors. I far too often hear people tell me and ask me how they can get out of jury duty. And it always kind of offends me a little bit because that's not what the public needs to do. Frankly, that's part of the public's responsibilities to come and serve as jurors in our cases. Our system requires it, depends upon it, and it's absolutely necessary if we're going to administer justice in our country.
Thank you very much. We have time for 2 more questions. Let's go to Mr. J. Albertia for the next question. It's going to go to Mr. Danny Brollier.
Mr. Brollier, we've just talked about the involvement of the public inside the court system, and both of you have talked about education of the citizenry to understand what's going on. Are there any programs that you would propose for that education to go out in the community? A lot of citizens will not come to the court to sit there, and as you've mentioned. But is there something that we could take out to the community to educate our students or our community about your role in our community judicial system?
Well, it's certainly appropriate, and I think a good idea for the judges, and I would be happy to do that, to go out to the courts, to the schools, and talk to the students about the judicial system. I believe that cameras in the courtroom, although they can cause difficulties, they are important because it does allow the public to see what's going on. And from a practical point of view, that's the only way that most of the public will ever see the inside of a courtroom is through the use of television. So we definitely need to let that happen, and it does need to happen within our court system. Certainly, those of us who work within the judicial system have an obligation to our community to inform the community about what's going on, to do our best to make sure that the community does understand the court system and what happens in the court system.
Judges are limited in what they can do in terms of their interaction with the public. We have to abide by judicial canons of ethics, and they limit us in terms of talking to the public about cases or impending cases. We cannot do that. It's unethical. But what we can talk about is the administration of justice, which allows us to talk about procedure, how the court system works, who the participants are, what the role of the judge is, and the role of everybody that's involved. The Supreme Court did a great job of that years ago with their Scales program, where they come into a community and actually hold court, real court, so that the people can see the function of the Supreme Court. It would be an effort that the judges would have to work with others like lawyers who are knowledgeable about the workings of the court, lay people, and certainly teachers. Teachers would be an integral part of that. But that needs to be something that we do and work together in the school system.
Mr. Jimmy Settle, you have the last question, and Mr. Gassaway, you have the first response.
Thank you. Mr. Gassaway, looking back on your professional life, I would be interested in hearing you describe, if you can recall, a defining moment, maybe a personal moment or a particular case or court action that caused you to decide in the beginning to seek the circuit court judgeship.
I graduated from law school in 1975 and started practicing law, and I practiced 15 years when the third division of the circuit court was created by the legislature. And when that was done, I was approached by well-respected lawyers who came to me and asked me to run for that position. I would have to say that what made me decide to do that, to leave the private practice of law and become a judge, was simply because of the love that I had for the law. It's hard to say that there's one specific incident where there was a moment in time when it happened. I think it's an evolution. I think it evolves. You become, you get to a point where you believe that you can better serve from the bench than from the floor. And so it's hard, Jimmy, for me to say that there's one moment, but I'm glad that the moment, the cumulative moment came, because I have enjoyed being a judge for this district, and I respectfully ask the citizens to return me to that position.
Mr. Brollier.
I too would find it difficult to say that there is one particular moment. I can remember one moment that forever changed me, and that was after my first murder trial, in which involved the death of a 19-day-old baby. And in that trial, the father, who I believe was 20 or 21 years old at the time, was eventually convicted. And I will never forget the moment when the jury came in and spoke and pronounced him guilty, and the judge sentenced him to life in prison. It was, for me, a moment that said, that's justice. That's what needs to happen in this case. It was, for me, also one of the saddest moments in my life as I thought about this man being put in prison for the rest of his life. That instilled in me this sense and understanding of the significance of what we do, particularly in the criminal court system. We need to seek justice, and I want to be a good influence for justice within our court system.
Thank you very much. We come to the closing portion of our segment now. We've finished with our questions from our panelists. And our candidates have been questioned about a range of issues, to include being the role of a judge, moving cases efficiently, effectively through the system, the timeliness, the fairness that the court needs to have. We talked about drug-related crimes, weapons in crimes, managing the system, and even outreach to increase the understanding of the general public towards the role of the court. Thank you very much for your questions, panelists. Let's now go to our closing comments. We'll hear first from Mr. John Gasaway.
I'd like to extend my thanks again to Leadership Clarksville, the Chamber of Commerce, and Austin Peay State University for this forum. One of the things that we didn't talk much about was the responsibility of a judge when it comes to civil cases. Most people come into court, it's not for criminal conduct, but it's mainly for civil conduct, or civil problems, I should say. Products liability matters, medical malpractice, breach of contract, divorces, custody of children, placement of children, parenting plans. All of these things are decided by the circuit court. It's not just criminal law, it's criminal and civil law. And you need to be able to address both of those areas. And I have a vast experience in both of those areas. I have been privileged and honored to serve as your judge. I respectfully request that you return me to that position. I have been humbled by the fact that 75 lawyers in this district have publicly endorsed me, and they have asked their friends and their relatives and the people that they know to support me, because those lawyers know, because they have worked with me for so many years, they know that my work ethic is probably unmatched by any judge in this state. They know that I'm going to make a decision based on the facts that are presented and the law that applies to those facts. They know that because that is what they have experienced in the past. And you know, I don't think there's any better indicator of what a person might do in the future than to ask the people who have worked with that person in the past. And I sincerely ask for your support and vote on Election Day. Thank you.
Next, we'll have closing comments from Mr. Danny Brollier.
Many people have asked me why I decided to run for circuit court judge in Division III, specifically against a sitting judge, Judge John Gassaway. I have to tell you, I thought long and hard about that when Judge Mike Jones announced that he would not be running for re-election. My first thought was to run for his seat. I also thought about and realized, and the bottom line is, the reason I'm running against Judge John Gasaway is because I do not believe that justice is done in his courtroom on a fair and consistent basis. That is a hard thing for me to say, and I don't mean to say that in an ugly way, but I will say this: there is a range of discretion that every judge has in which they seek to apply the law and to the facts that are presented in that case. Judges make decisions about what evidence comes in and what evidence does not come in. Those decisions are based upon their life experiences, their interpretation of the facts as they are presented. I believe that it is time for a change in Division III. I chose specifically to run against Judge John Gasaway because I believe that that change needs to take place in his courtroom. I've tried many cases, probably more than 100 cases in front of Judge Gasaway, and I know that many times, and this is my personal belief, I did not feel like I walked into the courtroom on a level playing field. I don't mean to say that he is biased in any sense, but I mean to say that from his life experiences, from where he comes from, he hears and decides cases and in one direction. I believe that my career as a prosecutor tells you what my general beliefs are, and I will certainly seek to apply the law to the facts that are presented in every case with a common sense application that is needed in our court system.
Thank you very much. I want to say thank you to Mr. Danny Brollier, Mr. John Gasaway for being with us here today and for sharing your thoughts and ideas with respect to serving as judge, circuit court judge in Division 3. Also want to remind you once again that Mr. Ben Dean will be on the ballot. Mr. Dean is unable to be with us here today. And I want to say thank you to our panelists as well. Once again, thank you for your great questions. As always, it's a pleasure to be with you here today. And to those of you who are watching at home, I want to remind you, state, primary, county, and general elections on August the 7th is the voting day. If you would prefer to be an early voter, you may do so. Early voting period goes from July the 18th through August the 2nd. You can reach them at Montgomery County Elections Commission. That's at Montgomery Veterans Plaza, 350 Pageant Lane. Thank you also to the folks here at the Mass Communications Department here on the campus of Austin Peay State University, and to Leadership Clarksville and your Clarksville Area Chamber of Commerce for making this forum possible today. Thank you for watching, everyone. Good night.